Well, that report, of course, is a stark reminder that a crisis of these proportions can bring out the worst in people. But there are some who say the pandemic could be a blessing in disguise. Rutger Bregmann is the author of a book called Humankind, A Hopeful History, and he joins us now from Houten in the Netherlands. Mr. Bregmann, let me quote you here. Disaster and crisis bring out the best in people. That's one of your theories. However, as we've just seen in India, this isn't really always the case, is it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not really my theory. It's actually what we see, from 50 or 60 years of evidence from sociology. So people often assume that after a crisis hits us, a pandemic or a natural disaster, that we, become really selfish and that people start hoarding stuff and that we show the worst in each and every one of us. But actually, science is something very different. What you're really seeing is an explosion of altruism and cooperation, really. I'm sure there are lots of examples, that get a lot of attention in the news of people behaving selfishly. But if you zoom out a little bit, and if you look at the 700 case studies, for example, that have been collected by sociologists since the 1960s about how people actually behave after, for example, a natural disaster, you find something very different, actually.
So are you actually saying that the coronavirus pandemic is a blessing for humanity?
No, I would never say that. I'm just saying that there is reason for hope as well. I mean, this is obviously a huge test for our societies, right? But let's remember that throughout the world, people, governments, nations have made the decision to lock down and to put, saving lives first over profit or economy. I think that's a pretty extraordinary thing. And what's also happening is that around the globe, governments have come up with lists of so-called vital professions. And you look at these professions and, you can't find the hedge fund managers on them, but it's the nurses, it's care workers, it's teachers. So this crisis is a great reminder for us as well about, what's really important and who are doing the really valuable work. So yes, I mean, a crisis can be a shifting point for societies. We can go down a dark road, but it could also move us in the right direction.
Well, a reminder it surely is, but do you really believe that we will start paying people who work at supermarket checkouts, nurses, all these vital jobs, that we're going to start paying them better? Or don't you expect, like I do, that we'll forget about all this as soon as this crisis is over?
Well, there have been very interesting developments. For example, 2 weeks ago, there was an editorial in the Financial Times, the world's leading business newspaper. And the Financial Times said, that we need to reverse the policy direction of the last 40 years, which was all about competition, about privatization, about, shrinking the welfare state, and that we need to move in a very different direction of taxing the wealthy and implementing a guaranteed basic income and, having a bit stronger state. So this crisis could actually be a shifting point that gets us out of the age of what we call the age of neoliberalism and move us into a different age that is more about cooperation and solidarity. It's not for certain, so this is not a prediction. It is a possibility. It's something that we can hope and fight for.
So you say this pandemic could be a unique opportunity for humanity.
Exactly. Every crisis is an opportunity. Every crisis can be a shifting point. So if you look at the history of the 20th century, so during the midst of the Great Depression, people were already thinking about the New Deal. In the Second World War, in 1942, the Beveridge Report was published, which was sort of the blueprint for the welfare state after the war. So again and again, especially in times of crisis, decisions are being made in weeks or days or even hours that can have implications for years or decades. So it's time to pay attention.
Do you also trust the political elite around the world to use this chance and make the world a better place?
Well, I mean, there are obviously huge differences between countries, right? So look at what's happening in Hungary. It's just a classic example of a dictator basically using a crisis to give himself emergency powers, right? What Viktor Orban is doing. But then there are other hopeful examples as well. I'm from the Netherlands, and So far, it's interesting how actually this crisis has mostly brought people together. So the standard differences between the left and the right seem to be less relevant right now. And even our right-wing prime minister, Mark Rutte, suddenly sounds, very different than he normally does, right? He says, we're a deeply socialist country and we need to care for each other, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there are big differences from country to country.
Rutger Bregmann there with a decidedly optimistic view on the coronavirus crisis. Thank you very much.